Started, we start with you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Personnel, I guess I'll just start with what we're gonna see on the board. The agenda here, nothing out of the ordinary for this time of year. It is a little slow right now. We are working on coordinating some of our trip chaperones coming for the 8th grade trip, and the middle school trip that they have. We are getting a few resignations, just kind of normal turnover for end of the calendar year. Some people are going back to school, some people are kind of calling it quits here, taking a break or going a different direction. So pretty normal for what we are seeing on this agenda and coming. I know that we're just talking about our postings. We do have a handful of part-time latchkey positions. That's morning shift and afternoon shifts at all of our elementary buildings. The openings are specifically at Parkside and Riverview. Again, that's just part of the normal turnover. We just had an employee that was here for nearly 20 years retire before Thanksgiving, so still trying to kind of backfill one of those spots.
Yeah. Are there ever opportunities through Lake Erie College?
I do share with
Okay.
all of our current student teachers. I send a direct email to them.
Okay, good.
Not just Lake Erie, we have Penn State. We also work with Western Governors University. And then I share it directly with Dr. Kalis at Lake Erie to help us kind of spread the word there.
Okay, perfect.
We are planning for some long terms coming up, just teachers that are going out on leave. The majority of them are maternity or paternity leaves for mostly starting February, March, all the way through the end of the school year. So I've been posting those. Most of them are filled, so we'll start kind of seeing some of those come onto the agenda as the leaves begin to happen.
Now, is the new thing, or it's a newer thing, but like if, let's say someone's a student teacher and they're pretty much almost going to be finished up, that they can qualify to do that subbing?
They can,
Right.
so that is what we approved last board
Right,
meeting, was
right.
that student teacher permit. It gives them essentially everything that's in place for a substitute teaching license
Okay,
without the degree because they have the experience.
right, yeah,
But we
because I know.
don't pay them to student teach. They're
No.
there's a difference.
Right, I know at John Carroll with some of the student teachers I was supervising, they were getting hired by Orange and other places to finish out the school year.
Yep.
Okay,
And we do have one that is in that situation, will be in that situation, I believe, mid-month here.
mhm,
That will kind of transition from the supervisory student position into a long-term that she's covering.
okay.
Other than that, just providing an update on the military incentive recruitment that I had shared last meeting. We have submitted 4 applications for new hires. 3 of them started with us in July of 2023, so they will be getting the full $3,000 per person. One of them has to complete this school year to have the 1 year of employment under their belt. So nearly $12,000 is going to employees as a recruitment incentive, and $6,000 of that, in addition to that, comes to the district. And that was from the Department of Education and Workforce along with the VA.
Okay,
So it's a very smooth process. It's an easy application
that's good.
from the applicant side and from our side as a school. And they've been very responsive. I think maybe just because it's just starting that they're able to get to them quickly.
Mhm.
So it's nice.
How many do you have participating?
Right now, the 4 that I've submitted are eligible. There's 3 more kind of in the waiting that you have to be a full-time employee. So I have confirmed with the VA, if they were to transfer from a part-time to full-time position, we could then submit their application and they could get it.
Mhm.
Not too much more going on. You will see on the board update yesterday, the district, the central office sent out a appreciation snack to all of our buildings, departments, and offices. Just kind of something little to keep everybody kind of spirits up and chugging along to get through the rest of the semester before all the holiday food comes next week. So something fun. I think that's all that I have.
Okay, thanks.
Did you want to add anything about retirement thing or another time?
Oh, well, yeah, I did send out on the agenda item that Mr. Schlepp retired. We're gonna miss him, and we are going to work to, let him, first of all, go through the retirement memo. go through what the process looks like for replacing,
So you'll review that with us,
in executive session.
okay? Yeah, so.
Not
Brush up
this
on your
one.
weather, yeah, I know.
Yeah, no.
Brush up on your weather.
I'm working on it. I was out
Forecasting.
this morning looking.
You may
so-
need to take a class.
Yeah.
He'll do just well.
I mean, you can't listen to what the news people say, cause they
No,
would
but you
have
gotta
us
start
on
watching
school
it
today.
5 days before, like Chuck does.
Also be awesome.
Yeah.
I did
Yeah.
take a physics of weather class to get my bachelor's degree in accounting, so.
Oh.
So you have some background.
One electives I had to take.
Hold it, Gary,
Physics-
step in.
The physics of weather, yeah, it was a lot more complicated than I thought it was gonna be, so.
You simply remember when they call for nothing is usually when you get something.
I'm like, I should went to that field because you can be wrong all the time. You get in trouble.
Yeah,
This field is
exactly.
wrong.
What was,
you
the,
just
what,
have
was the,
trouble.
what was the statement for the last 3 days on the National Weather Service?
Oh, confidence is limited or something?
Oh, yeah.
Low confidence.
Low
Yes,
confidence.
Confidence is low.
Yeah. We think it's gonna be really bad, but we're not confident. Okay.
Okay.
I'm gonna say that in my next 5-year forecast.
Confidence is low.
Good point.
Well,
So-
congratulations,
Yeah.
Chuck.
Thank you.
Congratulations,
Thank you.
officially.
Like I said, it's the people who are being a difficult part, so. Thank you.
You can still send us weather updates.
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah, you can be our east
depending
side,
on what I'm doing.
the east side
but
connection,
Yeah.
we need that east
My
side connection.
next part of life, I definitely will. I definitely will.
Who's gonna start the coffee pot at 6 in the morning?
There
Well,
are
the
some things
deputies have been doing
We've got
it.
plenty,
Yeah,
we've got
I
plenty
got
of
that
time to
covered.
transition some things.
Yeah.
The baristas, there's 2 baristas in the morning now,
Yeah.
so. we're good.
All right, board agenda review. Lori was gonna send out an email. I believe we're supposed to meet at 5 PM for executive session, for economic development. We also have, land purchase and personnel items that we'll kind of discuss in that 5 to 6 hour before the regular meeting begins at 7.
That's just 1 hour, not 5 to 6 hours, just the between 5 minutes, just to.
Yeah. Just to clarify.
Thank you. You're welcome.
And then between 6 and 7, what happens?
That's when the fun begins.
That's the board
That,
meeting.
that's
No,
the
we're
regular
both- yeah.
board
Oh, so
meeting.
we're starting at 6.
We're
Yeah,
starting
six,
at
yeah,
5,
exactly.
we're starting at
That's what
5.
For
The
executive
session.
yes, the business meeting
Exactly.
starts at 6.
Yeah, no more late nights. I was looking out, and you guys were like, practice.
Because it's nighttime when we start now anyway.
Yeah, even if we
Oh, yeah.
started at 4:30.
How true is that, right?
The agenda is fairly light for December as far as the financial section goes. We have our monthly financial reports as usual. There's a resolution on here that we do every December that comes from the county. It's a resolution accepting amounts and rates. And it's basically a resolution that lists all of our approved tax levies that are on the books and their gross millage. We haven't gotten our effective rates or our evaluations yet, but we do this resolution every December as part of a routine item. Sometimes I know in the past there's been some confusion, like, does that mean you're putting the levy on the ballot? No, it's just an annual procedural thing. So, we also have a resolution to approve additional purchase order with Burns and McIntyre and Seed for legal services because, you know, we have a retainer we pay for our traditional legal expenses, but anytime there's union negotiations or construction contracts and things like that, and economic development items, those are outside the retainer. We got a lot of those things going on this year, so it's higher than typical. The next item on the agenda is a revised service contract with the ESC, the Western Reserve, for the current school year. We did meet with them regarding our contract termination and had a good discussion and dialogue about some of the challenges we've had and some of the issues. And after that meeting, they had announced to all of the school districts that are members that when you're a member of an ESC, that they get a subsidy from the state of Ohio directly, and they give 90% of that back to the districts to use towards services at that ESC. One of the challenges we have is most of our services are for special ed services, so if you use that credit and reduce our special ed expenditures, it creates a what's called maintenance of effort issue with our federal grants, because we're not spending enough on special ed on our own money, because
Yeah.
we're using that credit. And so, one of the things, that was one of the struggles that we had, so they are now allowing districts to spend those on other services. We can invoice ESC, the Western Reserve, and spend it elsewhere, basically, they'll reimburse us. So our thought was to use it towards the substitute teachers, which we contract through the ESC of Northeast Ohio. Well, now we can just bill the Western Reserve and get reimbursed for that cost from ESC of Northeast Ohio. And they're also giving 95% instead of 90% to all districts. So that's about a $10,000 cost savings between the additional credit we get plus not having a 5% or 6% service fee on top of it, because we're going through a different avenue. So that'll be a financial win for this year. And then we're still gonna meet with ESC of Northeast Ohio and meet again with the Western Reserve after the first year, kind of discuss what we want to do for future school years. So we have that. We have a couple of then and now certificates on here as usual. And then donations, we'll have,
There's two separate donations, because you can't vote on your own.
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
There's Brewster Mill
Sorry,
donation.
I didn't mean to cause a problem.
No, thank you, it's not a problem, we just have to pull it out.
Yeah,
as a
I get
separate.
So we'll have a separate vote on your
Yeah.
donation, so you
Okay.
can abstain
Okay.
from that.
So it's actually,
May I ask what the donation is? For?
It was for the drama program.
Oh, okay.
we actually have to pull it out of the consent and make it its own item.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
what it is.
We also will, we put under the buildings and grounds agenda typically, but it's we'll set our tax budget hearing and January organizational meeting at this meeting, so we'll have your calendars ready for, it has to happen between January 1st and January 15th. And then we'll also have the approval of Lori Kniske as President Pro Tempore for the January meeting, basically just designating her as presiding over the first meeting until we select president and vice president for 2025. That's pretty traditional how we do it, just whoever was serving as president presides over the first meeting until that's decided. Other than that, we do have the policies on the agenda. That's not really there are some financial policies, but that's on the agenda for first reading. There's for approval, but there's also a first reading of a policy that came through.
It just got voted in, it was like, I think the lame duck, or it just got approved, and so Neil had just released it, and they have to have a policy in place by,
Like January
January.
22nd.
It's in the Friday memo, so that you guys
Yeah.
can review it, so we put it on for first reading,
Right.
and then in January, probably at the
That'd be at the organization.
organizational meeting, we'll have it on as an adoption. It has to be adopted by, like, January 22nd.
Wow, that's a tight schedule for
Yeah,
two
it's
readings.
it's a short
Yeah.
policy, it's a
Yeah.
new policy. But you guys can review it Friday, starting Friday, it's in the back.
Then do we set a date for that organizational meeting at this board meeting?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Hopefully not on a Saturday this year.
Yeah.
We got a Saturday this year.
I know.
We can get calendars lined up for the first 2 weeks of January.
Okay.
We already covered the ESC service contract, doing board agenda review. Gap conversion audit update, fiscal year 2024 ended on June 30th. We account on a cash basis, we have to convert it to Gap, generally accepted accounting principles for audit purposes. So we did our filing right before Thanksgiving, which is the deadline. It's, I think, 150 days after fiscal year or something like that. So those are filed, the audit's been ongoing, and, they take months. And,
Yeah.
sometimes they're done in January, sometimes they're done in March, it just depends on their schedule. And they usually come in and they leave for a while, and they come back, and they leave for a while, and
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, they were in before Thanksgiving, and I just reached out the other day just to try to touch base, and
Yeah.
there's still not much that they.
They came in, requested a ton of stuff, and then they haven't heard from them for like 2-3 weeks. Hey, what's going on?
Okay. Yeah, I don't know where to ask this in this agenda, but we do get Medicare reimbursement for things, don't we?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, cause that, I didn't realize was a significant,
Medicaid.
yeah, Medicaid
Yeah.
through services provided for children,
Yes.
yeah, right.
And it's a very complex process, and throughout the year, so you'll see a lot of times, like, we bill throughout the year, you get what's called interim claims, and usually it's a smaller reimbursement throughout the year for different services, and then we do what's called a cost report at the end of that fiscal year, that, you get the bulk of the reimbursement then, usually that's
Right.
$200,000, $300,000, $400,000, but Medicaid is historically 2 years behind or so I think we just got.
You don't count on
We
it.
just got our 2022 reimbursement,
Wow.
like a month or two ago.
Mhm.
So the 2023 one will probably come, typically they come around June.
Right.
We might get 2 in this fiscal year, which might make a little blip on the
Yeah.
forecast, but.
Does, I know it offsets costs for like speech and OT and things like that, but what about, you know, when, they're, billing for like, counseling services or things like that? I mean, do we get reimbursed for that? I'm not sure about counseling.
That's a Cheryl question, I don't know if we,
That's a growing area.
it depends on the direct services that are being provided and how they're being provided, I know that that's a part of it.
Yeah.
Whether it's a group or one-on-one, and I think that if the parent signs off, they can, but there's a whole lot of, you have to be Medicaid eligible, you have to hit all these criteria.
Okay,
And I think that is through signature, but we would double check with
okay,
Cheryl to see if that
all right.
is happening.
Fun fact, when I first started here in 2016, we were still owed 2011, 12, 13, 14, and 15. We finally got that caught up. That's all.
Crazy.
There's a lot more to that story, but
Yeah.
that's for another
Yeah,
day.
thank God Cheryl's not here. She has PTSD from that.
I don't know, because we were being audited too by the
Yeah,
Iowa
uh-huh.
State. They called me
That's something.
a month or two after we started, like, hey, I know it's not really your problem, but it is now because you're the treasurer. I'm like, oh, okay. All right, and then, so last thing I have is just to kind of talk about, we're doing some large capital improvements, and we've had some ongoing discussions about how we're planning on paying for that, or how that looks, and what funds we're gonna utilize. And we do have, at next week's meeting, we have Michael Purcella, who's our municipal advisor we've worked with for many years. He's the expert on different borrowing options for capital improvements and what that looks like. He assisted us when we passed the bond issue in 2016 to build Parkside and Riverview. And, we went to Chicago to Moody's, get our rating, and, walk through that whole process. And so we've been in touch for over the years, because every time we've discussed another bond issue, another borrowing, we've always go through him and see what that looks like and what our options are. I'm gonna pass out, this is kind of old information, but wanted to share, we're gonna get updated information for next week's board meeting. So this little chart I passed out,
Oh, come on.
this was information from September.
That's exactly right.
Would you like my copy?
The top 4 options are for 20-year, what's called COP certificates of participation. The bottom is for tax anticipation notes. Those are 10-year notes. Based on what we're looking at borrowing, based on my knowledge of things that are in the facilities plan coming up for approval and things that we're looking at, we're going to be looking at larger amounts than these, so we're going to get some projections on those next week. And so all these here, on the far right column kind of shows what your annual debt service would be based on those borrowing amounts. And, there's some flexibility in how we structure these things. So all of these have what's called a call date, a 5-year call date. So what that means is once that date passes, you can pay it off, refinance, whatever kind of like a mortgage where you restructure that or whatever, and once you hit that date. That's a 5-year call. We can adjust it and make it, if you make it sooner, your interest rate will go up. If you make it later, you might be some savings, but then you're locked in for a longer period. So it's kind of those financial decisions we'll have to analyze once we know for sure what we're looking at borrowing and how we want to structure that. But
They make their money regardless, right?
banks always make their money.
Yeah, oh, they stay in business.
Mhm.
So did you say this is based on 10-year and 20?
The top section are the COPS, those are 20 years. And then the bottom section are tax anticipation notes, returns of 10 years. You can extrapolate that from looking at the third, I guess, fourth column, final
Okay.
maturity date.
Right,
So
Okay,
either
got it.
2034 or 2044.
mhm.
What does
Um,
COPS mean, Gary?
It's certificates of participations.
Oh, okay.
But, you know, kind of just looking at what those options are, I would, I'm gonna pass out, this is our 5-year forecast. I know we've already reviewed it last month, but I figured you probably didn't bring it with you to look at it again.
I did. I'll take it away. So TAN stands for?
Tax anticipation note. And when you do a tax anticipation note against your permanent improvement fund, you can only, you're limited to a 10-year period, you can't go longer than that. And you're limited to 50% of the estimated revenue from the PI fund. So there's a little bit of limitation there. It does have a lower interest rate, but there's also less flexibility. What Michael Purcell is gonna do is he's gonna run some new projections, and on the COP side of it, okay, we have, these are 20 years, we're gonna look at 15 years and 25 years, and let's see what that looks like.
Quick question, Gary, on.
Yeah.
You said that you could only, like guarantee 50% of the PI fund?
Correct.
Okay, so, and what is our annual PI fund?
It's about 2.6 million or so. One of the things I have to verify, because we did look at tax anticipation notes in the past. So when you put a levy on the ballot, you get what's called a certificate of resources. It basically says how much this levy's gonna collect.
Mhm.
The question is it based on that amount, or is it based on what we're currently collecting? Because that number was like 2.4 million, but we've had new construction in our community over the years, and now it's grown to like 2.6 from, over the past 8-9 years. So it's basically what number is that? It's not a huge difference, so it's just something we have to verify on what the maximum. I've always said 12 million is kind of the max we can go, but,
Mhm.
we might have a little bit of wiggle room there.
Okay, thanks.
Looking at the 5-year forecast, one of the points I just wanted to make was, we'll fast forward a year. So let's say 2025 is over, we go to 2026, and let's just say 2025 happens as we project, and there's no surprises or changes. So now we're in fiscal year 2026. If you fast forward to 2028, our ending cash balance is a little more than $2 million, which obviously is a concern. So one of the things we're looking at doing is, after the first year, having a work session, talk about what a levy looks like, what that timing of that looks like, what the options are, and obviously there's expenditures we can look at as well as reducing. But
And these are operating funds, not PI.
Mhm. And these reflect the new tax valuation.
correct, and this reflects the new valuation. So if we were to take, I know there's been some discussion about taking interest revenue or taking some of the reappraisal money out of general fund and using those for improvements. What we have to be cautious about is that, so if we're a year from now in 2026, well, if 2028 ends up going negative cash balance, we would have to file what's called a financial recovery plan with the Ohio Department of Education. We did that back in like 2000. When I first started here, we had to do one in 2016. We did our November forecast because we were projecting a negative cash balance 2 years out. Some districts like Madison that, has had financial struggles for years, they do one of them every year. Basically, their forecast is typically showing a negative balance in 2 years. So I just wanted to kind of put that out there, just as a consideration, if we were to take funds from the general fund and use them elsewhere.
For the debt service, though, how do you project paying for the loan?
So that would come out of our permanent improvement funds. So what happens if when you, so let's say we decide to borrow $10 or $12 million and doing the comps method. What would happen is we would, they're almost like bonds, basically. And Mike Priscilla can probably explain it better than I can, but it's almost like issuing a bond. So when you issue that debt, you're gonna get that $12 million in cash now. We would put that into a separate fund. It's an 004 fund, it's a
Okay.
building fund, which is kind of what we did when we did Parkside Road. You have that cash now, well, because you have to have the cash in hand when you sign the construction contract. Well, construction takes time, and then by the time they construct and you get your pay applications and you actually pay, and, you're gonna have that cash for a while. It's gonna be laddering down over a year, year and a half, 2 years, depending on how long things take. Like, for example, I made the last payment on the vestibule project, and it's been up and going for a while.
Yeah.
You'll be earning interest on those funds as well. So that helps offset, because you're gonna have change orders. There's gonna be some scope creep when you start tearing in something. Oh, we should replace this door, replace these couple windows, or whatever might come up as whatever we're doing. Obviously, in Riverview, there's probably not a lot there, but if we're doing work in other buildings, there's plenty of things that need done, and sometimes it's like, well, if we're already in here doing this, and we didn't think of it during design, or like, hey, it'd be nice to put a new floor in here, or something like that. And those things come up throughout these projects, so that interest.
Would it be in our favor to go through and look at all those things before we
Of course, yeah,
finalize?
yeah,
Okay.
but there's always something that comes
Right,
up.
right.
Or you tear into something else, and it's like, oh.
Well,
Yeah, there's always unknowns
right,
too.
yeah.
Yeah, more so
Especially when
without
you're older.
overstructure.
Yeah. So that interest, because you'll earn interest on that money that we have now in hand, that help offset those unexpected expenditures that come up throughout the project. Or it gives you flexibility for other things that you might want to add to the project going forward. So just as a consideration if we're borrowing that's kind of how that works.
And then that payment comes out of PI?
The payment would come out of PI. going
Okay,
forward.
so that's why it wouldn't affect the 5-year forecast on our operating funds, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Because if
I
the
don't-
PI fund's
I don't
not
think
in
I
the
realized that.
forecast, so you
Okay.
won't see that on this document.
Okay.
So I know we're only collecting part of that reevaluation of property tax this year because of the way it schedules, but then
Right.
when it's the full amount, which we don't know yet, because you're finding that out, you said, was it in December,
We're-
was it
yeah, we'll
3.5, or what is it?
We'll get our,
Yeah.
what's called our Schedule A later. I actually inquired when we got the resolution accepting rates for the board agenda, and they said usually around Christmas is when we get it,
Okay.
sometimes a little bit before, sometimes a little bit after.
So we'll know at the organizational meeting.
We should know then, yes, for sure.
Okay.
But we're already projecting a 28%, and so that's already reflected in our 5-year forecast for general fund now. If it comes in a little bit higher, that's good. If it comes in a little bit lower, that's not good, but I don't anticipate coming in lower. It probably come in around 29 is kind of what I'm
Mhm.
thinking. But we used 48 in our forecast to be conservative, and that's what we projected in May, and didn't really want to change it until we kind of knew.
But you've budgeted it so that all of that money is going into general?
Correct.
None of it's being, okay. All right.
'Cause that's where it's, the levies that those funds are generated on are general fund levies.
Okay.
Because the permanent improvement fund, that levy that tax rate will just reduce with the valuation increase, and we don't get additional revenue from the permanent improvement levy from the valuation increase. It's
Mhm.
only from new construction.
Yeah.
So that tax rate will drop on that accordingly with the valuation.
So if you have your 28%, you said,
Yeah.
if it comes in higher, is there an option to put that in PI?
You could do a fund transfer from general fund to PI.
Mhm.
We could also structure part of that payment to come out of the general fund. So there's 2 different ways you could do it.
Okay, because the interest you're earning, is that in general fund?
If we were to,
I just want to ask.
if we're borrowing funds, the interest from those funds would go back, I said we put it in that 004 building fund,
Mhm.
so we would allocate the interest to that 004 building fund.
Okay.
For that.
So that
Typically
interest
you-
is in building
Yeah,
fund.
typically you allocate the interest based on the fund balances of the different funds.
Okay.
Okay, let me ask a question. So let's say there's $12 million that is going towards whatever, and you then put that in a fund that collects interest. And then over that period of time, you're drawing, let's say, $1.5 million a year to pay your payments, but then that, as that's drawing down, but that's still collecting interest over that period of time.
To clarify, so when we issue that debt and put it in that 004 building fund, that's to pay for the actual construction.
Right.
So the debt payment would come out of.
It's only collecting interest while the construction's going on. Once the payment comes through, we then pay it. But it's collecting the interest that's close to the amount of the cost of borrowing during that time.
During that time.
And the
And
payment-
yeah.
And the payment's actually coming out of the PI fund.
And it frees that PI fund up to be used for emergencies, for other small projects, for scope creep, for everything else that kind of comes around. It gives us more flexibility at that time to kind of move through. And then on the call date, we look at where we're at. Did interest rates come down? We can refinance it. Do we want to accelerate the payment? Do we want to, where are we as a district in that point
Right, okay.
when it comes through?
And kind of going back to the call date and refinancing, so back in 2016, we issued the bonds, well, it was actually early 17, we passed the levy in 16. We issued those bonds to build Parkside and Riverview. We already, the call date has just passed, we had a 7-year call, that just passed on April 1st of this year, but we were still able to refinance what's called a taxable refunding, $13,720,000 back in 2019. It saved us probably $1 million, it was either $1 million or $2 million in interest payments over the life of that portion of that debt. So there's opportunity, even though right now interest rates are higher, at some point they might drop, maybe we get another pandemic and get 0 rates again. So
You bite your tongue,
Yeah.
Blacko.
we were looking at it hard during the pandemic, like, does it make sense? Does it make sense? And it's like, it didn't quite make sense yet because the debt wasn't callable, and it's getting kind of way into the weeds of complexity. But if our bonds were callable during the pandemic, we would have been able to refinance those and probably would have saved a little bit of money there, but the timing didn't quite work out right.
Okay.
Trying to think of anything else I wanted to cover at this point.
So the amounts that you're looking at borrowing, is that,
These are different than what we're gonna have some updated ones.
We're gonna have some
Oh.
updated ones next week. This is kind of just, so I'm
this
gonna.
is just
I'm gonna bring
something.
a updated one to the board meeting next week. Our municipal advisor was gonna get it to us hopefully by tomorrow, but didn't have time to get it to us by this morning's meeting. Looking at some larger options too, because I know there's some other things in the works with the facilities plan that we're looking
So
at.
this is for, like, one building project or 2 building projects, I should say?
It all depends on what we decide, so it
Okay.
doesn't have to be, it
Okay,
doesn't
I
have to
just
be
wondered.
right. It
That's,
doesn't
I
have to be
guess,
a-
our limit to spend, right?
If you do something like this and take a larger number out, you're only paying one time for all the transaction fees, all of the lawyers, all of that stuff, so you have the cash at hand. And then now you have a larger sum to do more with. So it's not just, okay, we're gonna borrow for this project, then we're gonna go back and borrow for another project and another project, you're borrowing once. And you're borrowing a substantial amount that you can kind of go and do a lot with.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah, because, we kind of know what our immediate needs are, but going out, some of it's
It all
dependent
kind of
on
changes.
how it looks. And no one has, as I say, a crystal ball to know what's our next project. And that would be my concern is, if we have this on the books, is that gonna include that, or is that going to be a separate thing?
I mean,
If
that's a
there's something
decision
we
that
need to
would-
do 5 years down the road, which is in this time frame.
So, I mean, that would be something that, when you look at the plan and all that, the draft plan, that first chunk would be what really would cover the parts that are underneath the first plan. So it kind of, that with the continuing PI.
Okay,
So instead of asking voters for money or anything like that, that's the way to kind of do that. And then the second part of the plan, which involves something bigger, we would have to go to the voters at that point.
okay.
the part of it too is, you know, we do have a healthy balance in the PI fund. And it's balancing, we don't wanna wipe it to zero because it takes time to recover and, you know, part of it is if, you know, we could put a down payment, a loan down, we can pay cash for part of the improvements and then finance the rest, and then still keep a good enough balance in our PI fund that allows us to still do smaller projects while we're doing these larger projects, because, you know, like this past summer, we did like gym floors and some bathroom partitions and some new carpeting in classrooms and some furniture purchases. If we maintain a decent cash balance, we can still do some of these smaller things while we're working on bigger things as well. So there's flexibility there, where if we, you know, pay all cash for Riverview per se, and then we drain our PI fund down to a small amount, we're gonna have to take some time just to recover and have enough cash balance, so, you know, we have a boiler replacement comes up or some type of other emergency that needs to occur, we would have those funds and have to borrow something for that. It's like if you're building an addition on your house and you pay cash for it, and all of a sudden your furnace goes and you can't afford the furnace. You know, which item are you gonna finance? To me,
Well, and
it's
the financing rate in a house is a lot better than a one-room furnace too.
Yeah,
true.
so, true. So PI money, when does that come in?
Those come in twice a year. Well, typically they come in for our tax settlements, so we usually get an advance in February, and then the settlement's typically in March. Sometimes it's April, depending on, usually it's late March on the first half calendar year settlement. And then we get an advance typically in July with the final settlement in August typically on that fund.
So it's divided into 4 payments? Is that what you're saying?
You basically get 2 tax settlements a year, but you get they advance us some of the funds ahead of time during that.
Okay, so they advance,
Yeah.
And what do we get on each one of those, let's say?
It's about, because, I mean, we get about 2.6 million or so it's about 1.3 each time. When you add the advance and the settlement together, typically some taxpayers pay their taxes for the year up front, so you see the first half calendar year settlement slightly higher than the second half year. It's usually like a 52-48 split or 53-47 split, depending on the year. So typically your first half settlement of calendar year is always a little bit higher, but not anything substantial.
okay.
Speaking of boilers, how'd they make out with that one that had the bad heat exchanger?
Was it Parkside?
I think,
You know, I haven't heard, I don't know.
Yeah.
I know they have heat today, I checked.
Can Rich give us an update?
That
I'm
will be
assuming-
at Buildings and Grounds.
I'm assuming we're.
Okay.
And then, that comes out of
We
Buildings
just
and
wondered,
Grounds, and
'cause-
then Buildings and Grounds it'll come out of there.
That was originally from a construction level thing, right? Wasn't there something going back to the original contractor and try to resolve the issue? And then we thought we
Right.
could fix it?
Yeah.
Okay. And then obviously, if a boiler goes, we have cash flow. I mean, when you have those things, when you have anticipated funds coming, so.
I mean, there's
Okay.
always options for, you know, it's one of those things where, so throughout the year, like, let's just say our PI fund is 0 right now, this is for hypothetical, and a boiler goes at Buckeye. We could still move forward that even without the cash, because like throughout the years, you know, we budget, we have what's called appropriation, which is our annual budget, and we have our certificate of estimated resources that says this is the money we expect to come in. We're still in compliance. We would create a negative unencumbered, negative cash, like unencumbered, or not, what am I trying to say? A negative available balance in that fund, but we haven't spent that cash yet, so there's gonna be a timing issue. We can always advance funds from the general fund to PI temporarily to cover it and then advance it back within the same fiscal year. We did that one time with, I forget what we did it for. It was, when we were doing the turf project, I think we were starting the weight room project, which is the John R. Gym, and we did like a temporary advance out of the general fund. We knew the cash was coming, but we didn't quite have it yet, so we did a temporary advance.
Okay.
Usually by June 30th, as long as you're above 0, you're good, or you have to do the advance.
Okay.
Now, obviously, we have healthier balances, so it's not a concern at this time, but could be in in future years.
And this summer, when we were at the media center having our meetings, I remember you gave us something from the PI levy where there was you were in some kind of loan situation or something, you were paying it back. Can
No,
you-
we're still paying that back. That's a project from eons ago from.
Well, you're thinking of House Bill 264
Yes.
project, that comes out of the general fund, but when I,
Yeah.
so
Was
when I-
it general fund or
Yeah, general.
PI? I thought it was PI.
So when I first started the PI fund, there was about $1 million in debt payments due in the PI fund out of the 2.4 that we were collecting at the time.
Mhm.
And those were for prior purchases for musical instruments, school buses, Chromebooks, there's some HVAC controls and things like that. So there was because the PI levy was not, it was a lower amount prior to that. And then the district also had other financial challenges for operating funds too. So, and we had more we had 6 elementary schools at the time, and 4 of them were older than Buckeye and Melridge that needed a lot of work. So there was a lot of stress on that PI fund, and they had a lot of things that they had to borrow. And so, over the first 2-3 years, there was all kinds of debt payments to pay for those prior projects that,
Okay.
a lot of that stuff was, it wasn't, big building improvements, it was basically necessity stuff that had to happen.
Okay.
We were in a different position now,
Mhm.
than we were back then.
Okay.
Anything else?
I think we
Well, they'll give us several scenarios to look at.
yes, and that's the thing, we have a lot of options to
Options,
consider,
yeah.
and, there's flexibility of, we have
Mhm.
time to decide how we're gonna do that.
Anybody else have anything? All right, I guess we're done. Thank you.